Hello, this is Mary Ann from Sewing Seams Easy's online sewing bee. I'm going to show you how to make a pair of pyjamas bottoms now. I'm going to do some kids ones, but the same principle applies for adult ones. And if you're not making a top to go with them, because that's a bit more complicated, just wear a t-shirt with it, okay? Now, I haven't got a pattern for these pyjama bottoms. You can buy them. Simplicity does a good one that I've used in the past, but this time I'm going to use these and draw around them. I'm going to show you how to make a pattern, because pyjama bottoms are so simple and you can do it with just one pattern piece. So what we're going to do is use a little pair of jogging bottoms that my grandson has just grown out of, so I'm going to make it a bit bigger than this. If you've got something that fits the child or the adult, that's great. You want to make that size. All you have to do is draw around and add a seam allowance. Mine, I've got to add a bit more than that because he'll be 3 shortly and he's growing like mad. Okay, so I've got some brown paper to draw the pattern on. You can use wallpaper, turn it over, use the back, or any other roll of paper that you happen to have. It's quite a simple shape to draw. Okay, the fabric I've chosen for this, I've actually got loads of it and I made him a smaller pair a year or so ago. This is a brush cotton, so really nice and soft, and it'd be warm. So if you want to make summer pyjamas, then use a thin cotton. Okay, this would be a bit warm. These are the ones if you're making them for Christmas presents, that sort of time of year. Really soft, lovely to work with. And we're also going to use French seams, so that might be something new for you. We have to use an open seam on one of them because French seams don't go around curves. And we'll also be doing a casing for elastic. So a couple of things to learn, but all simple techniques. So I better get drawing these pyjama bottoms out. Right, I've just laid the little jogging pants out, folded them in half. That's your side. That's going to go around his bum. That's the inside of the leg. Now, I'm just going to draw around these. Nice simple shape. Okay. Now, if I then turn that over like that, so you've got a mirror image, I can then draw around this one. Okay, so we've now got, that's the side seam, that will go around the back and that will go around the front. Now I want to make these bigger, so you can measure the child, you can say, oh, he's grown a couple of inches, so I'll make them a little bit longer, like that. We can make them just a little bit bigger, like that. Oops, that's gone in a bit. Okay, now we're going to have to add a seam allowance, which is normally 1.5 centimetres, 5/8 of an inch. So if we add that on the side, so that's going to be there. Now you can measure all this out. I'm doing it by eye, but you can, as I say, measure your seam allowances. Now, and again on the other side we want it. At the bottom, you've got to have room for a hem. So you want about 3 centimetres. You can make it more if you want, particularly for a child's one, because then you can allow room for growth. And just let the hem down. At the top, you're going to have a casing for the elastic to go through. So we're going to want a bigger gap for that. It's going to have to be the width of your elastic plus a little extra bit to turn over. So I keep going back to inches because that's what I'm more used to working in. So I would allow an extra 1.5 inches. So that's probably about 5 centimetres, 6 centimetres. I have to get the tape measure out to check that. But I'll put the exact measurement in the workbook to make it easier. Okay, so now we have our shape. Now, don't choose your best dressmaking scissors to cut this out. You'll make them blunt. So I've got a little old pair of scissors here, and I'm just going to cut this pattern out. If you're not sure about the sizing and you don't feel confident in your pattern, get an old sheet and make it up in that first. Then you'll know if the sizing's right. And also it's good practice to do that. Make it up in a sheet, and then you can, if it turns out all right, you've got an extra little pair of pyjama bottoms, and if it's not okay, excuse me, you haven't spoilt your fabric. So it's, as I say, nice simple shape. We finished cutting that out. We're then going to mark some notches on so we know where to match it up. Right, I've finished cutting the pattern piece out. I'm just going to mark a couple of little notches so that it's easier to match the seams up. So on the leg, 17 centimetres from the bottom. I mean, this is on a child's one, so it's going to be slightly different on an adult's one. And I'm just putting a little line in there. And if I do the same on here, I'll know that that has got to match with that, as well as that matching with that. Okay? So nice and simple there. Next I'm going to, this is the right side of the fabric, the pretty side. The wrong side's the plain one. So I place this, I'm going to place this fabric right sides together. Now it's really wide fabric. That's the selvage that goes down the side. That was the piece, that was the edge of the fabric that was hooked onto the loom, and sometimes along here you get little holes. So the warp threads go up and down and the weft goes across. And just so you know for future reference, if something is cut on the bias, it's cut at an angle of 45 degrees. Now if I get this fabric, it doesn't stretch, not really. Well, slightly that way. But it's not stretchy fabric. But if I wanted this to be stretchy, I would cut something on the bias. Fold it like that, and that really stretches. Now, this is nice and easy fabric because it's got this pattern on it. What I'm going to do is fold my fabric so that it's straight, so that the squares all match up, and I want to be able to fit my pattern piece on here, and that will fit. So that's good. So I'm just making sure that my fabric is lying nice and flat. And I can place the piece on it. Now I want this to lie straight. I don't want it at an angle. With this pattern it would look silly, but it wouldn't hang properly. Now on a baulk pattern you're going to have a line with an arrow at either end, which is your straight grain, and you're going to measure from that to the selvage, and then further down that to the selvage. Now with this pattern, as I've just made it, I'm doing it by eye. You can draw a straight grain line on here with a ruler, and then you'll be able to line it up. Make sure you've got it straight. So that's just going to be a line that runs parallel down the garment, and you're going to cut it parallel to the selvage. Now under here I've got some pins, my tape measure, my cutting out scissors. You use the decent scissors for cutting the fabric. There we are, there's my pins. Pin it on, keep it flat. Right, that's pinned on. Pin on all the corners, and then if you need another one down the edges, do so. But basically, wherever it changes direction, you need a pin to hold it. There we are. That should do. And keeping the fabric as flat to your work surface as possible, cut your pattern out. Don't lift it up in the air, because then you won't get a straight line. And just cut around your pattern piece. And this is, as I say, these pyjamas are really simple because they only have this one pattern. I've threaded up the machine. Right, I've stitched the seam to 1/2 centimetre. I'm now going to turn it the other way out. So we now have the wrong side outside. And you can see that seam. Just pull it out. Okay, so the seam's right at the edge. Take a pin, pin it. You're going to do this all the way along the seam, and then you're going to stitch it at 1 centimetre. So that will use up all of your seam allowance. See, just pinning it all the way along. Right, so now I've done both leg seams. That's what it looks like on the inside. I stitched down at 1 centimetre. So you line the edge of the fabric up with a line that says 10. And as long as you stitch with that against that, you'll get 1 centimetre. Now I've turned this one right way out, so you can see there's no raw edges. It's all enclosed in that seam. But now the next thing we do is put the legs together, right sides together. So what that is, that one that's turned out to the right way goes inside the other one. So you just put your arm in, right, so you've got one leg inside the other. Got the right sides of the fabric facing each other. So you're going to match this seam around the edge. Okay. Now this you'll be sewing at 1.5 centimetres, the seam allowance. So just all the way around, just match it together. You can't do a French seam because it's on a curve and it won't go round, a French seam won't go round the curve. So we just stitch this together. Okay, 1.5 all the way round, and just match the seam together at the bottom. If you put one seam going one way and one the other way like that, so you've got that one going that way, that one going that way, it won't be too thick to stitch through. Otherwise some machines might struggle with that because there's a lot of fabric. So if that just goes like that, and you're going to go round there and up there, and that will be it. That will be both legs attached to each other. So I'm just going to do this, and then we can turn them the right way out and we can make the casing for the elastic. So see you in a minute. Okay, I've stitched this. I suggest that you go over the curve a couple of times to reinforce it a bit, and then we're going to clip into it. So get your scissors, actually these little snips might be better for this, and clip into that curve, not stitching, don't go as far as the stitching, but all that's doing is just helping that lie flat better. Now then we need to neaten this seam, so you're going to press it and we need to neaten each side. Several ways of doing it. If you're just doing a very thin cotton, you can just fold under the raw edge of the seam and stitch that down. This is fairly bulky, so I could use a zigzag stitch or the overlocking stitch. Now zigzag stitches, it does depend on your machine, but quite often on a single thickness of fabric they'll just sort of bunch it together, which looks a bit untidy. So I prefer to use the overlocking stitch. If your machine has one. Most of them do nowadays, but if you've got an old machine, which is fine, you're going to have to use a zigzag. So therefore, with that stitch, I'm just going to go along the seam allowance, just to neaten it up a bit so that it won't fray. I will finish that off and come back to you in a minute. Okay, so I've used the overlocking stitch down there. It's not as neat as the French seams, but as it's a curved seam you can't really do anything else. Now, what we're going to do next is to turn these trousers out the right way. So, let's just, oops, pull that out. One's done. Okay, we're out the right way. Next little job is to make the casing for the elastic. So turn under, let's see how much is it, about a centimetre? Yes. Turn under about a centimetre and just straight stitch round that edge. So I'm going to go back to my straight stitch and the size it was on. A lot of machines you can take part of the arm off to make it easier. Just stitch something like that. So just fold it under. You can pin it if you like, or if you're feeling confident that you can just turn under the right amount. We just go all the way around. Just sewing close to the edge, and it's just to turn that raw edge in. Hoping to do this before the bobbin runs out, it's not far off. So, a couple of stitches backwards and we're done. It. I like to use the snips when I finish the seam just to get rid of all the odd bits of thread. Otherwise I find it makes another job to do at the end of your sewing, whereas if you keep it neat as you go, it seems to work much better. Next thing we're going to do is to turn under just over the width of your elastic. I will pin this round. I'm leaving a gap there so that I can thread the elastic in. And then I just turn that over. All the way around. And straight stitch close to the folded edge. And that will give you your casing for your elastic. So that could also be a casing for a drawstring if you prefer that to having elastic. I would suggest certainly have elastic for children. You don't want them getting tangled up in a drawstring. But adults should hopefully be able to cope with one if you wish. Right. That's pinned all the way around, so I just stitch around that with straight stitch, leaving a gap so I can thread the elastic in. I'll come back to you in a minute. Right, I've got the elastic round, so then we take the safety pin off this piece, put the two bits flat together, Just stick a pin on it to hold it for now. And then just pop it under the machine foot. Like that. And if I wind the needle down into the elastic, now I can take the pin out safely. And you're just going to sew round that elastic. So let's just feed those through out the way. That round. If it's really wide elastic, you can do a sort of box shape to hold it in. Just going backwards and forwards on this. Right, that will hold okay. Let's snip off my thread. Now just ease that into the hole. There we are. And find where my gap was. Can't see it now. There we are, there's the gap. So I'm just going to machine that across to close up that little gap. And literally all there is left to do is the hems. Now what you do is turn up this just a little bit. Now that's your French seam, so you just want to check that that is lying flat. That French seam goes that way. Just check it up the leg where it's how it lies, and then just pin that over like that. And you can just machine round there. Then measure how long you need the legs to be, and then turn that up again. This one I've just turned up the once already. Okay, so just machine round this. Nice and simple to do. And your pyjama bottoms are almost finished. There we go. Finished pyjama bottoms. Hems done. Everything. Just need a good press now, and then they're ready to wear. Really simple to make. Alright, no excuses on these ones. You can have a lot of fun with this. And of course, there's no reason really why they can't be made for trousers. If you want just some really simple pull-up trousers. Nice and easy. Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye. Just a quick reminder, don't forget, post your pictures in the Facebook group. If you've got any queries, write them down there and I'll come along and answer them, or other people in the group might be able to help you. So don't be frightened. We're all good fun. You can have a laugh, and you can learn all sorts of different sewing techniques. We'll take it slowly to begin with. If you want to make a particular thing, tell me, and then perhaps I can do a video of it and a workbook and help you make it. Bye bye.